All right, we have part two of World War II lesson today. Now, the reasons America joined, right? You have Pearl Harbor. That's kind of the main reason. Today we get into a little bit about how the war played out. I really wish we could do this here in person because there is just so much stuff to talk about with World War II. But we'll do our best we can here. It'll be a little bit shorter than we would have spent in class doing it, but that's okay. I'll have a short video here to watch, and then I'll have a few additional videos for you to view that kind of explain a little bit more about what happened with World War II. All right, World War II, going again with our next lesson. Our objective today, second part, is to identify significant events in the war, including events on the home front. The home front means where the fighting is not happening in America. All right, so supporting the war. You can see all these posters. These would all be examples of propaganda. So you have people being urged, of course I can. I'm patriotic as can be, and ration points won't worry me. So Americans were encouraged to ration their food, to eat less, and to finish all the food that you were given. The Army was putting out advertisements, trying to get people to enlist into the Army. And here you can see another poster saying that our soldiers' needs, they come first. So millions of people were working in factories to help support the war. You had 7 million women that start working. And in these factories, they would create things that we need for the war, like weapons, ammunition, supply, first aid equipment, things like that during World War II. The US asked people to buy war bonds. You can write that down. Those are loans to the federal government. If you buy a war bond for a certain amount of money, the government will pay you back that money plus interest at a later date. And so during the war, America needed more money, so they asked Americans to loan them that money in the form of war bonds. You had the federal government, that would pay that back. Japanese Americans, you have thousands of them that joined the American Army. 110,000 Japanese men, women, and children, though, were put into internment camps after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Our government was very distrustful of Japanese people and Japanese Americans. And so kind of like what Germany did over in with the Jews during the Holocaust, not quite to that degree, but they were still taken from their homes, Japanese Americans were, and forced onto these camps, which were basically just prisons. And that's where they stayed for a lot of the war. So internment camps, you can write that down, a place where prisoners were held during wartime. Here are some pictures of the internment camps. Fighting the war. 3 major fronts for World War II. You have Europe. This is where you had the Allies fighting against Germany and Italy. Then you had North Africa, where it was also the Allies versus Germany and Italy. And then you have the Pacific Front, which is where the Allies fought against Japan. On D-Day, probably the most famous day of the war, you have 150,000 Allies that invade Europe, led by Dwight D. Eisenhower. You can see this is the beach at Normandy where D-Day took place. You have American divisions, you have British divisions, and you have 1 Canadian division. Millions more followed behind them. You had American and British fought Germany from the west, and you had Soviets fought Germany from the east during the war. In May 7th, 1945, after lots of fighting, eventually Germany was forced to surrender to the Allied powers. Now, there's still a war in the Pacific with Japan. By the summer of 1945, America was close enough that we could invade Japan. There were lots of small battles on a bunch of tiny islands out in the Pacific Ocean. U.S. leaders feared many would die in an invasion like they had in previous ones, and so we developed a secret weapon at the time, the atomic bomb, that nobody's seen before. It's also a vocabulary word, a powerful bomb that can destroy an entire city. President Harry S. Truman, he is the one where the decision comes down. He's president at the end of World War II. In 1945, August 6th, we drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The decision was made that rather than risking thousands of American lives, instead, we drop a bomb and risk no American lives. So we dropped the first one in August 6th. This first atomic bomb was called Little Boy. Second one, 3 days later, Japan still did not surrender, even after 100,000 men, women, children, soldiers were killed. So America decides to drop a second one, Fat Man, on Nagasaki. Japan, they quickly surrender, and World War II is then over at that point. Now, other terrible things that happened was the Holocaust, where Nazis, they hated Jews, and they thought the Jews were like an evil race. And so their intention was to kill all of them. They forced them onto concentration camps where you had large number of prisoners, and they were forced to work. This was not just internment camps. This was a step farther, where they would be tortured and worked literally to death and killed in masses inside of gas chambers and shootings, all sorts of stuff like that. Over 12 million people died in these concentration camps. Here are some pictures of the atomic bomb. There's the explosion. That would be like a before and an after picture. It destroys nearly everything. One thing about the atomic bombs, yes, the explosion is terrible, but for years and years afterwards, you have all this radiation damage. So people would get very sick. There would be birth defects. There would be lots of people that would get cancer from all the radiation. Basically, the towns that the atomic bomb was dropped on were uninhabitable then for decades afterwards. Here are some pictures of the concentration camps run by Germany. These people would be starved, and so you can see how thin they were. They were fed barely anything and worked all day. And then here's a picture of how the map looks throughout the war. The black would be the Axis, and the blue would be the Allied powers. And the red is Russia. On to our summary. 1939, Hitler invades Poland. That starts the war. In 1941, you have Pearl Harbor that's attacked. That's when America joins. 1944, Allies invade Europe. And 1945, Axis powers surrender. So that's all the time we have to cover World War II. There are a few other videos with a little bit of more information on World War II for you to view. So thanks to America's involvement in the war, the Allied powers are able to defeat the Axis powers in World War II, and our world is a totally different place because of it. So, like before, what we talked about with, God having his hand in everything. Well, World War II was terrible. And Pearl Harbor was a terrible event where many people lost their lives. But if you think closely about it, where was God's hand in Pearl Harbor? Well, if there was no Pearl Harbor, there's a chance that America never would have joined World War II. In America, if they wouldn't have joined World War II, there's no way that the Allied powers would have been able to come out of there victorious. And so there, once again, you can see God's hand at work, working for the good of his people.